Hi, I'm Stephen Budden. I've been somewhat frustrated because most people think of themselves as non creative for some reason. And I remember I had a friend who would always say, "You are creative, most people are not." And Buckminster Fuller would say, "Everyone is a genius in childhood, and education de-geniuses them." Matisse would say, "Genius is the return to childhood at will." And you remember the Christ quote, Jesus quote about being like the little children. Now, there's something about the unfettered access of children to the creative realms that helps them create a world they love to live in. Like, when you can tell if someone's fully awake and alive in the way they look at children. Because a lot of older people look at children like, wow, look how alive they are. My daughter yesterday was wearing fairy wings to the store, and so many people were like, wow, wow. And then I saw some people like, right? The puritanical archetype, that's not good. Fairy wings in a store, they have no place here. One woman had a mask on and she was kind of leaning away because she was afraid of germs or whatever, So the relationship to children is the relationship, symbolic of the relationship to your own innocence. Now, the reason I bring this up is because everyone has creative faculties. Creativity, by definition, is to arrange things in such a way that it expresses what is in you to the world. And the reason it's in a creative way is because it's you doing it in your way. When people think they're not creative, it's because they can't, quote unquote, draw like Leonardo da Vinci, who artistically was like moderately creative. He was more inventively creative, which is a different aspect. Michelangelo, on the other hand, was very artistically creative. So we don't do art like either of those people. It doesn't mean you're not creative, right? There's Andy Goldsworthy. If you've ever seen the documentary from some years ago, he goes out into nature and he puts little pieces of nature together and then photographs that there'd be like a spiral of ice, a cocoon of leaves, and that's his unique genius. That's his way of being creative. And the reason that you wouldn't compare that to Leonardo, like Leonardo never made contraptions out of leaves that were so ephemeral the next day they'd be knocked down by the wind, etc. And there's beauty in the ephemerality. There's a lot of artists that work in that way out of ice. And I remember being in a gallery once and seeing these blocks of ice, and they would be melting in the gallery, dunk, 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 and the drops would fall on these drums, dunk, 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 and it would make this beautiful rhythmic pattern out of this act of decay, or this act of transformation, whatever you want to call it. And that symbolizes like the butterfly from the cocoon, and whatever season to season, whatever beautiful transitional process from one state to another. And that's symbolic of the alchemical process of art in and of itself. You take the substance and you turn it into something else. Isn't that beautiful? So the plight of my life has been people not thinking they're creative. And then another one is people thinking that artists have to be broke. That's frustrating as well, because I've studied marketing for 10 years now. I was a broke artist for sure, and then I broke my neck. If you're broke, you'll be broken. That's the way the metaphors, the archetypes work. It's just out of necessity. You need to be woken up and your unconscious beliefs brought to consciousness. Boom, that bridge. You're broke. You're broken. You can find what you need. I was reading about Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, and how he was a Basque soldier. He was wounded in a famous battle. He was laying there and he had this sweeping conversion. He was broke spiritually, so he was broken physically. And that's what to expect. Now, this may happen anyway. However, I want to guide you to the process through which you escape that. You escape what Gurdjieff would call the law of accident, back to the realm of conscious creator. Isn't that interesting? The law of accident. Because when I broke my neck, I crawled out of the water and I no longer believed in accidents. I say that. This also was a trajectory from like the artist path to the quote-unquote healer path. And now I'm kind of circling back to the artist path, because they're all one in a sense. However, most artists I know are so riddled with trauma, riddled with poverty consciousness, barely functional as humans, can barely communicate. So I didn't really resonate with some of them in those ways. I resonated with them obviously in other ways, like the deep probing of life, the experiencing materials, the commitment to the deep work, the quiet sanctuaries, and not even all of them were like that. So there's the meditative artist, and then there's the artist. There were some that were just doodling while watching YouTube videos or like some crazy shows, and that's their own archetype, their own child at work, their own creativity. The reason that works is because they're being creative in their own way. Is it their own though? If they're constantly inundated with other people's media, I don't know, possibly. so the point is, like, learn what you need to know in this world to embrace your gifts. People who are, whether you're creative or not, whether you're an artistic genius or not, this Van Gogh story is hugely tragic because he was one of the most gifted artists in history, in modern times, at least gifted painter. Now the funny thing is, he wasn't an artist. He wasn't a gifted artist in the realm of like the European style draftspeople who could draw, had all the musculature imagined. His early drawings are very childlike and unrefined in that way. So if he would have been like, oh, I can't draw like Leonardo like most of us do, he would have given up long ago. He persevered, boom, 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 through that, and he was able to create some of the best paintings in history. Like, paintings, people misunderstand them because you stand in front of one that has a certain aura, a certain energy of the artist, which is known if you look at T.C. Lethbridge's work. He could sort of use a pendulum and test like a typewriter or a coin or an ancient Roman piece of armor and see who the owner was, what their age was, what their gender was. All these emanations he figured out how to measure. And so there are emanations off of human creative works, and those are armor. I mean, that's different. A painting will have even more of that. If you look at their just intense focus on this object and their intent for you to see it, to communicate, to be a bridge across time, for you to see it. That's the sacred, mystical aspect of art. Now, the tragic part is that he was totally broke. He only sold a few paintings. He only was known by like people really in the know, and his brother suffered in marketing for him. He was also broke. So there's a challenge in the sense that he put 100% of his effort into doing this art making, and that's someone's prerogative. However, you could put 10% of your effort into learning like this thing they call marketing and not suffer, not be suicidal, not be a drug addict, etc. So is that worth it, I wonder? That's the important thing. The broken neck brought me back into balance because I was an obsessive artist and nothing else matters. If I just make great work, they will come. You build it and they will come. Perhaps, and usually not at all. They won't even know you exist, so they don't know where to go to. There's all this noise. The crappier artist will get all the accolades. You will sit in a studio, and I've definitely seen this. Like the worst artists who are more talkative and more social got all of these awards and these residencies, and the artists that just sat in a room and made great art, however they were indecipherable verbally, they didn't get any accolades, they didn't get any recognition. I mean, they might have now, and likewise their wives and husbands and so-and-so drifted away because they were just in the studio and they didn't know how to communicate. There was no bridge to their outer reality. Inner and outer reality was like so separated. There was like a chasm between them and the world. And so what are you going to do differently as an artist, as the artist archetype? I think it's one of the most beautiful ways to play in the world. If you ever read the works of Henry Miller, he also didn't know how to market, and he gave everything to this endeavor. And he was like really penniless till he was in his 60s. He had a series of wives that left and children that left because he could barely function or survive until his banned books were allowed, Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, and he was able to collect some royalties finally because, you know, censorship came into that too. And he didn't necessarily know how to delicately balance. And do you have to? Not necessarily. Part of his beauty is the, like, as we talked about earlier, the unfettered just flow of what he considered reality through his pen and typewriter. So he was broke his whole life too, and if he would have learned a little bit about temperance, because a lot of great minds too now, they just unleash a flow of words on like Facebook or whatever, and they immediately get banned because it's something against some power that be that doesn't want you to say. And so we need to be a little bit more like Peter Pan, diligently dancing around the issues and sharing without being completely banned. If you want to get banned, I'm sure you could go write 10 posts that would get you banned. You know what to say, right? Just watch what other people even post their stuff. You can share things and get banned these days. The point is that to do it sort of democratic, politically, more astutely, so that you're not blocked. It's the same with the creative endeavors. You want to save certain works for the people that are receptive to it. All the great artists had like their erotic work that was kind of private for the higher end patrons, and they had their public work. There's sort of an esoteric and an exoteric version of their work. Hokusai has like the greatest Japanese artist of all time, very profound ambitions, very meditative, very dedicated to mastery. And he had like some works of like pornography that were woodcuts that would only wind up in certain hands. And that makes sense. They were rare, they were hard to get, etc. If that would have just been the things he was cranking out, he might not be as well known today. And that's kind of like what Henry Miller did to himself. He's one of the best authors of the 20th century in certain exalted moments, and he's not discussed in colleges or anything at all. And, you know, I don't think he has to cede to the powers that be and do what other people want. It's just you look at the end project, then you work backward and kind of connect to where you want to be and how you're going to get there. And marketing is an essential piece to that. So what I considered, like, what was my yearly income before was my monthly income now in different capacities, because I had to like elevate my wealth consciousness beyond the poverty consciousness that I was mired in. And part of that came from celebrating artist archetypes as being like the greatest people to model, and they were completely weren't the greatest people to model. If you look at I created the Bloom model because there's 12 seeds that are the fundamental facets of life, and if you look at their model, it's just completely imbalanced. Like, they're totally focused, often at the expense of health. They're totally focused on the creative work. So a lot of times an artist's vitality continues to decline because they're so focused on their work that they die young or suffer or like commit to addictions because they don't take time to recuperate, etc. And you can be a creative genius and somewhat balanced, I believe. So, and even if you can't, it's most likely worth it in that you live an enriching life and do the best work you can in the context of that enriching life. Like Thomas Mann, I often talk about, I have a page per day challenge for written work, and he wrote a page per day. It was a finished page per day. I think Stephen King aimed to write 5 pages per day, and I think it took him takes him like 4 to 6 hours. So isn't that interesting? You can be one of the most famous, wealthiest writers in the world. As for Thomas Mann, one of the most critically acclaimed writers in the world, and also a bestseller throughout much of history, and only writing 1 page a day, which maybe would take a couple hours. I mean, James Joyce and Thomas Pynchon and such, they'd labor for thousands of hours over 1 page, and that's another way of writing, and that's okay. However, you can look out into the future, see what kind of life you need, and then create the life you want and build that bridge. I think the internet and technologies make these things possible. A lot of people are leaning out of the creative aspect and being like, AI, write all my stuff. And you're sort of giving up some of the beauty of what it is to have a free-flowing enterprise that's an expression of yourself. I mean, sometimes AI can work great, and sometimes you don't need to have every brand or product be a free-flowing expression of yourself. I'm just saying we're not always prioritizing correctly on what we're giving up and what we're getting out of an equation. So this is, I wanted to make this post because the creative aspect, you are a creative being, and the marketing money aspect. Money can flow when you output value. One of the highest forms of value is creative work. It's one of the things that enriches the world the most. We just forget this because we're programmed to look at all this other crap and look at all these other millionaire moguls. And if you're on social media, you're being programmed. As I heard recently, what entertains you trains you. What are you training yourself in? What are you worshiping as sacred? And what are you losing for that programming? That's what I wonder. So this is an invitation to consider that, for sure. Now, I've written 4 books. I have novels that are more secretive. I write them for the pure joy of it. They're just the flow, outpourings of my soul. Sometimes sexual in nature and incendiary, and that's okay. I write them for my own edification. And when they go out in the world, they produce a certain vibration. Your works actually matter in the grand spiritual sense. If you ever listen to Dolores Cannon, people create works and songs because the frequency needs to be anchored into the world at that time. And that's, if you're called to do that, then let yourself do that. You'll see if it interacts with the world, how it interacts with the world, etc. So if you want to explore in this further, I'm putting together a guide on abundant creativity, both metaphorical and literal prosperity. So if you would like that, comment prosperity. And if I get enough of these comments, I will actually finish that and put that together. If not, it's okay. I'm not offended. I have an MFA in fine art. I spent the first many decades of my life spending 7 or 8 hours a day doing different kinds of art and creative endeavors, mostly figurative, and then I was an abstract minimalist and a novelist and all these other things. And I want to share some of what I learned with you. And also backtracking, learning all about marketing and all of that. That has been profound for me. I see marketing now as a beautiful alchemical process that can lift your life to where it needs to go. So most of marketing language will turn you off if you're creative or holistic or spiritually inclined. Most of it, and some of it will be kind of a scam. And I want to bridge the gap between those two and teach you practical marketing strategies that feel good and are aligned with your essence. So I'm not one of the greatest marketing masters in the world. I'm just one of the people that have lived through the poverty of art making and then learned many hundreds, if not thousands of hours from some of the greatest masters there are. And Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham. And I've had to slough through being able to understand and also to appreciate their work because it's so financially based that it was hard at first. I was like, ugh, marketing. That's like a dirty word. However, if it can be the bridge that gets you to where you want to go, and there's understated marketing, there's quiet marketing, there's loud marketing, there's you're going to go stand on a building and light something on fire and that you're the artist who does that, or you're going to cover a building with toilet paper, or you're going to slow iterations like sea waves in the consciousness of people, of your imagery. You're going to sell your individual works so that essence breathing thing is important, and you're going to create an exclusive effect where only a few people have it and they're really, really acclaimed people, and they share it because they love it. You can create the world as in the Holly Hogshead marketing work. I don't think her first name's Sally Hogshead, I believe. Her fascination work is very beautiful in this sense. You're going to create pre-frame people so when they look at your work, they're not coming out of an abyss and being like, what's this thing? They're seeing you based with the pre-frame of what you want them to see. And it's always been like this. There's artist statements. You read the artist statement, you go see the art. If you just go see the art, especially 60s or 70s conceptual art, it makes no sense. You can kind of glimpse, there's a little bit of beauty in it. I kind of understand the profundity. You really need the context. So now that you know this, you can lay the context as the red carpet they walk through. So as they're walking through this thing, which is clandestinely known as marketing up to your work, they're going to say wow, that's stunning, beautiful, powerful. Look at all this. I heard this about this person, I saw this about this person, they spent 400 hours doing this, or they sat in meditation before they got, whatever the story is that led up to that thing, that's it. That's you. That's beautiful. So, again, comment prosperity and I'll send you some more details on this guide. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon. Happy creating.